Don's Wife, Chapter 6, Part 4. At last, Ardy was on the threshold of realizing his dreams. Dreams he had always dreamt of. The land of the most romantic poet of England had its seducing effect, at least on Kamini. Though it was certainly not a poetic honeymoon in the real sense, it surely was a redeeming one, especially for Harsh. After the disastrous consulting between them in the wake of frenzied preparations for leaving, it truly was a dive into the depths of sensuality initiated and ensnared by Kamini. She was determined to live out her fantasies, shaped during her reading of the great romantic poets as a student of English literature. Unburdened of his demons of death, destruction, and dread, which had affected him in his childhood and all his formative years, Harsh too was now considerably relaxed and awakened to both the subliminal and the libidinal. Their first night in the chalet was an anthology in erotica. In the private area of the woods, they ran amid the trees like two school children on the loose, while a light drizzle drenched their flimsy nightwear. He caught up with her and, like a medieval hunter, carried her on his shoulder into the hut-type cottage where the logs of wood were already burning in the fireplace. The flames were inviting. The wine was extra intoxicating, and Barbara Streisand was shamelessly seductive through her silken crooning. He tore off his long jhabba of sheer cotton material before helping her peel off her negligee, which had stuck to her almost like her skin itself, making the black peaks of her mountains and the mysteriously dark gorge between the summit of her long legs dangerously threatening and tantalizingly inviting. Bent on their knees, they stood facing each other. The leaping flames of the fireplace reflected on the wetness of their bodies, glistening both with sweat as well as rainwater. Their eyes remained locked, searching for some mysterious depths, while their hands stroked each other's bodies tenderly, inventively. Suddenly they were aflame and claimed each other's mouths with a crushing urgency, their lashing and piercing tongues at once probing and igniting. They plundered each other's bodies with a ravenous fury and an unsparing indulgence. They were the two bodies in the midst of a storm, or perhaps two musical instruments at the point of a crescendo. When a certain inadequacy seemed to creep into him, she went down on him, her mouth not letting him shy away. She guided his manhood into the wetness of her womanhood, and soon they exploded, first him and then her, into a volcanic eruption. They lay together on the rug itself, spent and rediscovered unto themselves. The flames were burning low now in the fireplace. Much of them had turned into embers, pulsating and shining now and then, here and there, beneath the ashen mass. As they slowly returned to the conscious world, they began to lick at each other's perspiration. Under the armpits, in the valley between her defiant mountains, in the ridges under the necks, and even in the humid furriness below the narrow of their stomachs. With fresh stirrings in his loins and desire still encapsulated in their glazed eyes, he lifted her in his arms and carried her to the bedroom upstairs and dropped her on the large bed right underneath the glassed sky window. The drizzle had stopped. Moonlight coming in from the side window, as well as the large sky glass, drenched them in its mysterious bluishness. He stood mesmerized for a few seconds, watching her with fascination as she lay curled up on the bed like a painter's muse, with her long tresses partly covering her lethal nudity and partly spread, disarranged all over. She rose on one elbow with growing desire illuminating her eyes and grabbed his arm with her free hand. A slight tug and an irresistible magnetism had pulled him down to her heaving and inviting breasts. There was no panicky urgency this time. Instead, there was a languid steadiness as he kissed her on the hairline, her forehead, her eyebrows, her eyes, and her nose, and then buried his mouth in hers to devour at each other's salivate cave. He bit at her cheek and her neck, and then his lips slid downwards. He stroked her breasts before holding them in his hands as if in an offering. His quivering lips gripped the dark cherries one by one to unfasten the oozing passions and drink from them. Their electrified bodies trembled in unison as their organs, already familiar with each other, also joined in to play an unknown but intoxicating symphony with the passionate musk of their juices working as aphrodisiac. It was a bright and sunny day when they were woken from their deep sleep by the sound of someone beating the metal knocker on the front door. Wrapping himself hurriedly in a sheet, Harsh ran down to answer it. He spotted their clothes discarded the previous night by the fireplace. In a sweep, he grabbed them in a bundle and dived for the door. It was the day help, who had come to clean the place and cook their breakfast. They walked through the paved, narrow streets of Windermere, shopping for small knickknacks and tiny old shops which had been there for centuries. They visited various museums, travelled through the beautiful countryside, stopping at quaint little tea shops, and made love under secluded streams, isolated flat patches in the wood, and even in some deserted ruins of abandoned old structures. There were sudden arousals and sudden encounters at unplanned times and unexpected places. One early morning, straight after waking up, she came down wrapped only in a white towel robe and sat on the steps of the backside veranda that opened into a private patch of green. She waited for Harsh, who was busy practicing wood cutting. She leaned back at the wooden column to feel the pinkish sunshine on her closed eyelids. Having finished his task, Harsh returned to the cottage, bare-chested and wearing only a pair of jeans. He was bathed in sweat. He froze at his place, benumbed by the captivating view. Her mouth half open, part of a breast peeking out through the carelessly strung folds of the robe, and the dark growth beyond her long thighs coming slightly into view because of the one raised leg. There was lethality about the image. Slowly and Noiselessly, he put down the axe by the side of the steps and knelt close to her. He carefully undid the strap and pulled aside the folds of the robe and then gently pushed at her thighs to part them. She opened her eyes and looked at him in a half-confused state, as if in a dream. She saw the desire dancing in his eyes and soon matched it with hers. She pulled him close. He rose on his knees and moved nearer. She unzipped him to reveal himself, and then in a frenetic movement helped him to discard the unwanted garment. He took her then and there, writhing in dust and grime and sweat, biting and scratching, fuming and lashing over obscenities. It was wild. It was brutal. It was animalistic. And it was fulfilling. 10 days of honeymoon period passed quickly. It was generally a dream vacation. Yet there were moments of anxiety for her, which thankfully did not overstay, but nevertheless were worrisome. These were the moments when Harsh had sudden mood swings and betrayed an unpleasant self-centeredness, unexpected flashes of cruelty, and a definite chip on the shoulder against his father. The irksome feeling remained at the back of her mind all throughout her stay in London also, particularly because of a couple of instances when sexually he came very heavy upon her and then suddenly lost his potency at the moment of heightened ecstasy. This either sent him into a state of unfathomable rage or an unexplained sulk and withdrawal into a shell. But the time passed so fast in the processing of Harsh's admission, fixing an apartment for him, shopping, sightseeing, visiting old friends, etc., that they never came round to discussing anything or even truly sharing what might be issues of concern in his mind. Considering their marriage was still in its early phase, she did not dwell on the hitches either or try to talk out matters with him, lest he thought her overbearing. She loved him and was determined to make a success of her marriage for everybody's important individual reasons, her own, Harsh's, Hardy's, and her parents'. Besides, generally the beautiful memories of her honeymoon were enough to last a lifetime for her. For Harsh too, his new life was not exactly a straight and simple love story. It was a lot of adjustment, a lot of giving up, a lot of sharing, and above all, a lot of bridge building. All being the virtues he never had a good fortune of knowing, much less experiencing. But he was determined to try to make his marriage a success, Kamini being his only anchor, his only hope. End of Chapter 6, Part 4.